There's something quietly profound that rarely gets said about having a truly sharp mind. Most people imagine it as a gift, and in many ways it is. But what often goes unspoken is this. For many deeply intelligent people, that same mind that sees further, feels more, and thinks more deeply also carries a weight that others simply don't perceive. Today, we're going to gently explore what research in psychology has long understood, that high intelligence brings with it a set of very real, very human struggles. Not to burden you, but to finally help you feel seen. Struggle 1. The weight of a mind that never rests. There is something that sensitive, deeply intelligent people rarely hear acknowledged, and it deserves to be said with great care and gentleness. The very neural architecture that allows you to think with such richness, such depth, and such nuance, that same wiring, is what keeps you awake long after the rest of the world has gone quiet. Research in cognitive neuroscience has consistently shown that individuals with higher intellectual sensitivity tend to have significantly more active default mode networks. This is the region of the brain responsible for self-reflection, emotional processing, and internal simulation. In gentle terms, your brain doesn't simply power down at the end of the day. It continues searching, feeling, revisiting, and processing, even when you desperately wish it would simply rest. What others might dismissively call overthinking is, in truth, a profoundly sensitive mind doing exactly what it was always designed to do. The challenge is not that your mind works this way. The challenge is that very few people around you truly understand what it costs you to carry a mind that never fully stops. Struggle 2. The quiet ache of feeling unseen. One of the most tender and persistent struggles that deeply intelligent people carry through life is this. Genuine, nourishing human connection can feel surprisingly rare. Not because you lack warmth, empathy, or the desire to connect. In fact, you often feel those things more intensely than most. But because your mind naturally reaches for depth, for meaning, for conversations that touch something real and lasting. Researcher and psychologist Elaine Aron has long recognized that highly sensitive, highly aware individuals experience the world with an intensity that most casual social interactions simply cannot hold. Small talk doesn't just feel boring to you, it can feel quietly isolating, even painful, like standing at a window looking in on a world that speaks a language slightly different from your own. Psychologist Leda Hollingworth, one of the earliest researchers on giftedness, described this as the problem of communication, the gap between what an intelligent, sensitive mind longs to explore and what most everyday conversations actually allow. The result is a subtle, persistent ache of loneliness that has nothing to do with being surrounded by people. Struggle 3. Knowing too much to fully trust yourself. Here is something worth sitting with gently and honestly. Many deeply intelligent individuals are simultaneously their own most devoted students and their own most relentless critics. Because your mind can see so clearly every nuance, every potential flaw, every gap in your own understanding, every possible way your thinking could be incomplete, self-doubt can quietly take root in the very soil of your awareness. Psychologists recognize this as a deepened form of imposter syndrome, one that runs far beneath the surface of high achievement and outward competence. The painful irony is that the more honestly and carefully you think, the more vividly you see what you don't yet know. And that intellectual humility, while genuinely beautiful and admirable, can slowly and silently erode your sense of your own worth and capability. You doubt yourself not because you are weak, but because you are aware. And awareness, without self-compassion, can become its own quiet burden. Struggle 4. A restlessness that lives deep in the body. If you have ever sat in a meeting, a classroom, or an ordinary workday and felt something beyond simple boredom, a kind of deep, almost physical restlessness that you couldn't quite name or explain, please know that this experience has a very real psychological and neurological foundation. Research exploring dopamine sensitivities suggests that highly intelligent, deeply sensitive individuals may have reward systems that respond quite differently to routine stimulation. Ordinary, repetitive tasks don't just feel unstimulating to you. They can feel genuinely depleting, as though something essential inside you is slowly and steadily being drained away. This is not laziness. This is not a character flaw. This is not ingratitude for what you have. This is a sensitively wired, richly complex mind searching for the level of engagement and meaning it genuinely needs in order to feel fully alive. Many brilliant, deeply feeling people have spent years, sometimes decades, quietly believing that something was fundamentally wrong with them, when in truth, the systems and environments around them were simply never designed to hold the fullness of who they are and what they need. Struggle 5. The perfectionism that grows from caring so deeply. Highly intelligent, sensitive individuals don't struggle with perfectionism because they are arrogant or impossibly demanding. They struggle with it because they care, deeply, genuinely, and sometimes overwhelmingly so. Your mind can envision outcomes with remarkable and almost painful clarity. You can see, with vivid precision, exactly what something could be at its most meaningful, its most beautiful, its most whole and complete. And so when reality, with all its natural friction, limitation, and inevitable imperfection, falls short of that inner vision, the emotional distance between what is and what could be can feel genuinely significant. Psychologists describe this tension as the difficult space between high self-efficacy and the unavoidable constraints of the real world. You are not wrong for wanting more. You are not wrong for seeing what's possible. Learning to hold both your beautiful vision and the imperfect reality with equal tenderness and patience is one of the quiet, ongoing, deeply courageous practices of the sensitive, intelligent heart. Struggle 6. Feeling the weight of the world's pain too clearly. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that deeply intelligent, sensitive people know intimately, one that is rarely named and even more rarely understood by those around them. It is the exhaustion of seeing, truly, clearly, and unavoidably seeing, the inconsistencies, the injustices, and the quiet hypocrisies that run through daily life. What others can set aside with relative ease, your mind registers with uncomfortable and persistent clarity. Research in moral psychology consistently finds that individuals with higher reasoning capacity experience significantly stronger emotional responses to perceived unfairness, not because they are fragile or oversensitive, but because they understand, at a deep and instinctive level, what that unfairness truly means and what it truly costs. Carrying that awareness day after day, without always having a safe and understanding place to set it down, is one of the most quietly exhausting and isolating experiences a sensitive, caring mind can carry. Struggle 7. The paralysis of seeing too many possibilities at once. One of the most quietly surprising struggles for deeply intelligent, sensitive people is this. Making decisions, even seemingly simple ones, can feel genuinely and deeply overwhelming. Not because you lack clarity or intelligence, but paradoxically because you have almost too much of both. Your mind naturally, rapidly, and almost automatically generates outcomes, consequences, and possibilities from every angle. You can see, with quiet and careful precision, the many ways a single choice could unfold, beautifully, painfully, and everything in between. Behavioral economists have named this experience analysis paralysis, and for the sensitive, intelligent mind, it is not an abstract concept. It is a lived, daily reality. Every decision carries emotional weight. Every path not chosen remains visible and present to you long after the choice is made. And so what looks from the outside like simple hesitation or indecisiveness is often on the inside a deeply caring and conscientious mind doing its very best to choose wisely and responsibly in a world that rarely offers clean, simple answers. Struggle 8. Searching for a meaning that feels truly worthy. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist, Holocaust survivor, and one of the most profound psychological voices of the 20th century, wrote that the deepest and most fundamental human longing is not for pleasure, comfort, or even safety, it is for meaning. For deeply intelligent, sensitive people, this longing tends to be especially tender, especially persistent, and especially difficult to satisfy. Surface-level success rarely quiets it. Conventional definitions of happiness often feel hollow or incomplete to a mind that naturally asks deeper questions. You find yourself returning, again and again, to the question of why, not out of cynicism or dissatisfaction, but out of a genuine, aching, and entirely human need to live in true alignment with something that deeply matters. This existential restlessness is not a disorder. It is not ingratitude. It is not something to be fixed or medicated away. It is, in its own quiet and profound way, one of the most deeply human and beautiful things about you, a soul that genuinely and courageously refuses to settle for a life that doesn't feel fully and authentically alive. Struggle 9. The loneliness of a rich inner world. Perhaps the most tender and universal struggle of all is this: the loneliness that doesn't announce itself with drama or obvious pain, but lives quietly, persistently, in the background of a deeply intelligent and sensitive life. You can be warm, engaged, genuinely present, even joyful in the company of others, and still carry, privately and carefully, a whole rich interior world that rarely finds its full way into conversation or genuine understanding. Psychologists studying intellectual and emotional giftedness consistently find that this inner isolation is among the most commonly and quietly reported experiences of deeply feeling, deeply thinking adults. It is not about superiority or judgment. It is simply the tender, honest experience of having a mind and heart that perceive, feel, and understand the world differently, and longing, more than almost anything else, to be truly, wholly, and gently understood by even just one other person who sees you completely. Here is what psychology gently asks us to understand. High intelligence is not simply an advantage to be celebrated or a burden to be managed. It is a deeply particular, profoundly sensitive way of moving through the world, one that carries both extraordinary gifts and very real, very human costs. Recognizing these struggles doesn't dissolve them, but it does something quietly and powerfully healing. It replaces the loneliness of feeling different with the quiet relief of finally being understood. And for a heart that has always searched for meaning, perhaps the most nourishing discovery of all is finally understanding your own.